Hi, this is Unit 14, our last unit for the class, and we're going to be talking about corporate changes. Now, what are corporate changes? Often when you're working with an organization, you get to a point where they are no longer able to be effective in what they're doing, or they've decided that they're they've accomplished what they're going to, or that what they're doing is duplicative of what's being done by another organization or organizations. In those situations, what you want to do is really evaluate with him what the best solution is for proceeding with the organization. Do you want to continue it? Do you want to merge it with another organization? Do you want to dissolve it and distribute the assets? Do you want to have it serve as in conjunction, again, sort of a joint venture type of entity, only with another nonprofit organization, so that the two are working in tandem? What exactly is going to benefit the purpose for which the organization was formed? What's the best way to proceed? One thing to note, in California, if you have a charitable organization, one that's exempt under 501c3, under 2501, whatever it is, D of the Franchise Tax Board, I don't remember the exact provision. Anyway, if you have one of those, then the Attorney General must be notified, and with dissolutions must actually be involved with making the determination, is this actually going to go forward? You need a letter from the Attorney General consenting to the dissolution before you can actually file a certificate of dissolution in California. You also have to notify them at least 20 days before you merge a nonprofit with another nonprofit, and you have to notify them at least 20 days before you dispose of a significant portion of the assets, even if the organization is continuing to exist as a separate entity. So that's something that you must put on the top of your list. You need to do it before you plan on having the organization finalize its documents. You put together the information, and then you have to file it with the AG, give them at least the 20 days. What happens if they're at all concerned is within those 20 days, they get back to you and say, we want to know more about this, we're not sure about this, that type of thing. Now, just we're not going to go into any type of depth, but you should be aware that with medical types of organizations, particularly hospitals, the Attorney General actually has a whole process for reviewing those to make sure that it is adequate, that the people that are served by the organization continue to be served after the merger or dissolution or whatever it is. And so that's something that is going to take even more time. So especially if a medical type of entity is involved, you can plan on that being a significant amount of time in the process. Anyway, if you're going to be selling a portion of your assets, you have to notify the Attorney General before you do it. If you're going to be merging, you have to notify the Attorney General. If you're going to be dissolving, you actually have to get approval from the Attorney General. Well, now what's the difference between a merger and dissolution? The biggest difference is that with a merger, the two become one, which means that both the assets and the liabilities of the merging corporation are the responsibility of the surviving corporation. So the assets are owned by the surviving corporation, and any of the debts are due from the surviving corporation. So you don't want to merge with an entity if you don't know what the assets are, you don't know what the liabilities are, because you might find that you're taking on more than you anticipated. With a dissolution and a distribution of the assets, any organization that receives the assets, if there turn out to be more liabilities than there were assets, they may end up finding that those assets will be clawed back, but they're not going to be responsible for more than what they received. So that's a big difference. But then on the other hand, there's another huge difference, and that's when a corporation merges, if there are any gifts that are anticipated. If you have a number of people, for example, or even one or two that are significant, that have left or listed that organization in their wills or trusts, and so you're expecting, you have an expectancy at the end of their life to be receiving some of those gifts. If you merge the two, then the surviving corporation receives those assets. If you dissolve them, if you dissolve the organization and distribute the assets, that bequest disappears. It's no longer going to be effective. The organization or organizations that receive the assets as part of the dissolution do not receive the deferred gifts. So that's a big difference if the organization has done a good job of going out and getting people to list them in their wills or trusts. So that's something to be aware of. Big difference, but then on the other hand, you got the liabilities too. So that's just something to be aware. Other than that, a lot of the work that's involved is going to be similar. Just one other point: with a merger, you have a merger agreement, which will be filed if you're going to be making changes to the articles or bylaws as part of the merger. You will often do that in the agreement itself that's filed with the Secretary of State, so you don't have to do an amendment to the articles and the merger agreement separately. With a dissolution and a distribution of the assets, you have two documents. There's a certificate of election to wind up and dissolve and a certificate of dissolution. If everyone agrees, if you have all of the members agree, you have all of the directors agree, you don't have to file the certificate of election to wind up and dissolve. But if you don't have a unanimous consent from anyone that is required to approve it, then you have to file the certificate of election to wind up and dissolve, and then you file the certificate of dissolution. A lot of states, you file a certificate of dissolution and then you dissolve, you wind up and dissolve. In California, you file the certificate of election to wind up and dissolve. You distribute the assets, do whatever you need to, and then after you've done all of the distribution that you expect, you go ahead and file a certificate of dissolution. So that's basically a sweet summary of the corporate changes area. There is a fair amount of reading that you're going to do on it, but because there's so much other stuff that you're doing, most of the assignments will not be on this area, but you need to know about this because if you're working with nonprofits, well, if you're working with businesses as well, at some point you have some that come to the end of their life, and you have to have a basic concept of what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it. So with that, I hope you've enjoyed this class, and we'll talk to you soon.